At the beginning of the movie, a former gangster named Tae-sik is returning to his hometown after being released from prison. He is promised to leave behind his old lifestyle and start anew. Despite this, he is still both feared and respected in the town he once ruled. On his journey back, we see him reading notes written in a small notebook where he writes down the little things he wants to do in life. When he reaches his hometown, he goes to his adoptive mother's restaurant. She is known as the Sunflower Lady in the town. Her daughter, Heo, asks Sik to return later because her mother is not home. Sik innocently says he has nowhere else to go, so Heo suggests he go to a sauna. Sik takes her advice and visits a nearby sauna, where he becomes fascinated by an automatic lock, playing with it for a long time. This annoys a man who is trying to relax, and the man rudely tells him to stop. Sik apologizes, but when he removes his shirt, revealing his full body tattoos, the man is intimidated and backs off. Elsewhere in town, two policemen see a thug beating a woman in the street, but they are too scared to intervene because the thug works for Chong-moo, a feared gangster. They drive away, ignoring the crime. Meanwhile, Chong-moo is in a club punishing a traitor. While most of the town fears him, it is revealed that he used to be one of Sik's subordinates before Sik went to prison. With nowhere else to go, Sik visits Chong-moo. Surprised but respectful, Chong-moo welcomes him to the bar. However, Sik greets him briefly and leaves, unwilling to involve himself in the ongoing crimes there. Then returns to the Sunflower Lady's restaurant and meets her. She is overjoyed to see her son, but Heo is confused because she has never met him before. During dinner, the Sunflower Lady feeds Sik with her hands, which makes Heo jealous. Later, Heo takes Sik to the terrace and tells him that if he wants to live in their house, he must follow all her rules. Sik quietly agrees to everything she says. In another scene, a corrupt politician named Cho Pon-soo is introduced. He plans to build a shopping mall in an area where several locals live, including the Sunflower Lady's land. In public, he pretends to be kind and caring, but in private, he mocks the locals for believing in him. Meanwhile, Sik visits a doctor's clinic to ask about removing his tattoos, as they remind him of his past. The doctor informs him that the removal process is expensive and will leave scars, leaving Sik disappointed. Later that day, the Sunflower Lady storms into Cho Pon-soo's office, screaming and cursing at him. She reveals that Cho wants to buy her land to build the shopping mall, but she refuses to sell it. She bravely threatens him to stay away from her family and leaves. That night, Heo and Sik meet on the terrace, where she continues to boss him around, unaware of his past as a gangster. Sik doesn't confront her about her behavior and complies with everything she says. The next day, while Sik is working in a garage, the two policemen who witnessed the thug earlier watch him. They reminisce about how much trouble Sik used to cause before he went to prison. A flashback shows that Sik ruled the town a few years ago, with current gangsters Chong-moo and Yang-ki as his subordinates. After Sik was arrested, both men sought to take his place, becoming rivals in the process. Taking advantage of the situation, Cho Pon-soo used them to climb the ranks and become a politician. Currently, both Chong-moo and Yang-ki work under Cho, competing with each other. Meanwhile, Heo struggles with calculus in her math class. After class, Sik comes to pick her up, but he catches the attention of her math teacher. The two talk privately, revealing that Sik and the teacher used to date a long time ago. Sik thanks her for always being kind to him and leaves. Later, he and Heo eat street food when a man obsessed with Heo confronts Sik, accusing him of flirting with her. The man and his friends take Sik to an abandoned building and beat him up, but they stop upon noticing Sik's tattoos, which intimidate them. When Sik returns home, he applies ointment to his wounds, and Heo feels bad that he got hurt because of her. Elsewhere, Cho Pon-soo holds a meeting with Chong-moo and Yang-ki. He announces the opening of the town's biggest club, the Oracle, and says he will give control of it to the one who can acquire the Sunflower Lady's restaurant. The next day, Chong-moo and his men go to the restaurant and start breaking things, but they stop when Chong-moo sees Sik. For the first time, Sik loses his temper and strangles Chong-moo, demanding to know his intentions. The Sunflower Lady intervenes, sending the thugs away. When Sik asks her what they wanted, she brushes off the question. The next day, Chong-moo and Yang-ki meet and decide to work together to drive Sik out of town. Meanwhile, Sik enjoys his new life, helping Heo with her high school math and expressing his desire to go to college. Heo discovers that Sik is an excellent student when he easily solves complex problems. Sik later uses his first paycheck to buy gifts for his family. He gives his mother an emotional hug after gifting her something special and buys Heo a camera she has always wanted. Initially, Heo refuses the gift, but later, she brings him tea and quietly accepts it, walking away happily. The family goes on a picnic by a lake, where they eat, sing, and have fun together. That night, Sik is visited by his old enemy, Bung Jin, who advises him to move away with his family because Cho Pon-soo will stop at nothing to get their land. Spies inform Yang-ki about the meeting, and Yang-ki quickly calls Chong-moo to share the news. They suspect Cho sent Bung Jin to convince Sik to hand over the land and worry that if Bung Jin succeeds, Cho might give him control of the oracle instead. They decide to act quickly to drive Sik and his family out of town. Later, we see Sik and Heo at a hospital, where Sik is finally getting his tattoos removed after saving enough money. On their way home, they stop to eat street food. Following year, Tae-sik and Heo make the decision to attend the same college together. However, their lives take a dark turn when Tae-sik is at work, and Chong-moo, along with his men, shows up at the family restaurant to wreak havoc. They begin breaking furniture and smashing anything they can get their hands on. This time, the situation escalates further as they physically assault Tae-sik's mother, throwing her to the ground. Heo Yi-jae, in an attempt to protect her, hits one of the attackers on the head, but she too is shoved to the ground. Desperate, she runs to the garage to fetch Tae-sik, but by the time he gets there, the gang has already fled. Enraged by the attack on his family, Tae-sik goes straight to Cho Pon-soo, the corrupt politician backing Chong-moo, and confronts him in his office. Tae-sik warns him to stay away from his loved ones, but Cho, unfazed by the threat, tries to manipulate the situation. He offers Tae-sik a chance to become his business partner, hoping to use him for his own benefit. Tae-sik, however, rejects the proposal without hesitation. Feeling humiliated, Cho devises another plan to eliminate Tae-sik as a threat once and for all. This time, he instructs his men to attack Tae-sik and provoke him into retaliating, which would lead to his arrest. He even bribes 2 police officers to ensure that Tae-sik ends up behind bars. The gangsters confront Tae-sik while he is working in the garage, starting an argument that quickly escalates into a physical attack. Despite being hit repeatedly and severely injured, Tae-sik refuses to fight back, knowing that doing so would play into their hands. The thugs eventually leave, realizing their plan has failed. Later that evening, Tae-sik tells his mother about the attack while they are at home. As they talk, Heo, who has been stalking Tae-sik, arrives uninvited and mocks him for not defending himself against the attackers. Heo then brings up the sensitive topic of Dopil, a man whose death continues to haunt Tae-sik and his adoptive mother. The mention of Dopil's name stirs deep emotions in both of them. It is revealed that Dopil was the biological son of Tae-sik's adoptive mother and that he had died during a confrontation with Tae-sik years ago. Overhearing the conversation, Heo is taken aback by this revelation. Later that night, Tae-sik's mother explains the full story. She recounts how, after Dopil's death, she began visiting Tae-sik in prison. Over time, she saw the genuine remorse in his eyes and realized that he was a deeply broken individual in need of love and care. Moved by his vulnerability, she eventually adopted him. Heo, reflecting on her own troubled family life, forgives Tae-sik, revealing that her brother used to abuse their mother for money. The next day, Tae-sik's mother stumbles upon Dopil's old diary. In it, she discovers shocking information. 10 years ago, Cho Pon-soo had sent Dopil to kill Tae-sik. The ensuing fight between the two men led to Dopil's death and Tae-sik's imprisonment. Armed with this new evidence, she decides to confront Cho Pon-soo. She threatens to expose his crimes to the media, knowing it would destroy his reputation and political career. Cho, however, refuses to be blackmailed and begins plotting a way to silence her permanently. Meanwhile, Who is returning home from school when she is attacked by her stalker, who hits her on the head with a brick before escaping on his bike. It is revealed that the stalker has now allied himself with Cho Pon-soo and is working as part of his team. Tae-sik and his mother rush to the hospital, where they find Who unconscious with severe injuries, including swelling on the left side of her face. Overcome with guilt and fear, Tae-sik's mother decides that it is no longer safe for them to stay in town. She resolves to sell their restaurant and prioritizes her family's safety above everything else. Tae-sik goes to meet Cho Pon-soo and his gang to negotiate their departure. Cho, however, humiliates Tae-sik by demanding that he cut off his arm as a guarantee of his family's safety. Despite the outrageous demand, Tae-sik prepares to go through with it. At the last moment, Cho changes his mind and lets Tae-sik go, seemingly satisfied that he has broken his spirit. What Tae-sik doesn't know is that Cho has already sent his men to kill his mother. While Tae-sik is still at the hospital with Who, the gangsters break into his home and strangle his mother to death, making it look like a suicide. When Tae-sik returns home, he is devastated to find her lifeless body. He collapses in grief, holding her in his arms. With Who still in the hospital, Tae-sik is left to arrange the funeral on his own. In the days that follow, the family's restaurant is destroyed, and the land is seized by Cho's men. However, while cleaning up his mother's room, Tae-sik finds an earring left behind by one of the gangsters, confirming their involvement in her death. Fueled by rage, he tracks down Cho Pon-soo and his men, who are celebrating the grand opening of their new nightclub, Oracle. Bursting into the club, Tae-sik demands to know who attacked Who. The stalker steps forward, confessing to the crime. Tae-sik spares the life of Byun-jin, a young man he deems undeserving of the chaos. After letting Byun-jin leave, Tae-sik begins his bloody revenge. He fights through dozens of Cho's men, killing anyone who stands in his way. Despite being gravely injured, he sets the club on fire and takes down Chang-moo and Yi-ki, strangling them to death as they had done to his mother. In his final act of vengeance, Tae-sik kills Cho Pon-soo, avenging his family. Moments later, however, he succumbs to his injuries and passes away. Years later, Who is thriving in college, having rebuilt her life.